Yeah. Your daddy loves sitting under a tree like this. I remember one time.
Uncle Louie, can we not talk about him?
Sure. Sometimes it's hard to talk about someone who died because it brings up all those big feelings. Be kind of scary.
Yeah. It just makes me feel too sad.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel sad too when I think about your dad.
You do?
Sure. And sometimes I even feel angry that he died. You ever feel that way?
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like it just isn't fair. I mean, why did he have to die, Uncle Louie? Why isn't he here?
I wish I knew. But I do know that it's okay to have all those thoughts and feelings. I've had them myself.
Really?
Yeah. But, it helps to talk to someone about the way we feel, like we're talking now. Sometimes it feels better than keeping it all inside, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do feel a little better.
Which is why we are talking about it. Look, it's a tough topic. It's tough to talk to your children or the children in your life about death and dying. It's something that in our society we don't do enough or we don't do well. So here on The Dawn Show, we wanted to just share with you some experts who have dealt with this in different ways to really hopefully help you cope. So we have Karen Zinn, who's returning with Heart to Soul, and you have a great website. And of course, Joe Primo, who's with Good Grief, a counselor and author. Thanks so much again for being here. I want to go back to, and there's your book. So what do we tell the children? But I want to go back to the topic that we were talking about, the steps that people can go through. And I know this is on your Heart to Soul website, but we were saying explaining death to children, that you start with a practical definition of death, just simple, practical, keep it real. And then you've got follow-up with your personal beliefs, your faith, or what you believe, sharing that with a child. And then, as you saw with Sesame Street, in other words, let them ask the questions. That's critical, to let them ask about it. And then help them understand their grief. And we saw that in the video, just helping to understand, here's how it goes. The next one is there's no wrong or right way. And I think that's one thing that we worry about. Are we going to damage our child or a child in our life by even talking about it? And that gets tricky, doesn't it, when you're trying to talk to somebody, especially a young person?
Well, as a parent, you know your child better than anybody else. So if you see that there is discomfort, or you tell them as much or as little as you think they can handle. I mean, you're not going to tell a kid who's very nervous some information that's going to upset them even further. Just tell them as much as they need, and when they come back and ask questions, tell them a little bit more. But there's no checklist. Just like being a friend to somebody, there's no checklist. I can say, okay, I did this, and now I can move on to the next thing. There's no straight way to go through grieving, and there's no straight way to talk to your kids. You just have to use your instincts and kind of define it for them.
And talk, listen, connect.
Yep.
In our family, we've dealt with this because we have had two nieces, not just my Uncle Don, but two nieces within the last couple of years. Joni was 4 years old and beautiful and amazing, and drowned tragically in a swimming pool with lifeguards overhead and so on and so forth. It happened so quickly. And then baby Lizzie died of SIDS. And so talking to my kids about this, you take them to the funeral. One thing that we learned, though, that's important to their mommy and daddy, to Danny and Katie, is that they have 4 kids. And even though 2 have died, that we talk about the 4. And I think it's so important that you want to talk about those who are in heaven, but it's almost rude, I think, not to acknowledge, I know that this would have been Joni's birthday, or Joni would have loved this. They actually love that. Because I think the worst thing you can do is make people feel like their loved one, particularly a child, is forgotten.
Right. Or didn't exist.
Right.
That including them in that conversation And they're still part of your life. Just
Right.
because they're not here, it doesn't mean that they're not part of your life anymore.
Yeah.
Well, it's part of being humans. We have a long history with oral history, the sharing of stories. And for kids, they love to hear stories about that person who died, especially because if they were younger, those memories may not exist much anymore. They may be only learning about and maintaining that relationship through the memories of people who were older and knew them better. And at a place like Good Grief, we don't put tons of emphasis on memory, because that's a burden for a child to think, if I forget something about my dad, I'm somehow responsible for his immortality. So it's about that dialogue and that remembering in ways, remembering with people, conversations, over cookies and dinner, and doing things that that person who died loved to do. A sense of connection.
Yeah, and that's every time we see Dora. That's it, Joni, because she loved Dora. And so we always will say, oh, this reminds me of, or even the other day, there was this yellow butterfly, Mariposa, the butterfly, and they're like, oh, that's Joni, that's her spirit. So I think it's so important to hold that dear. And with my kids, they get it. I mean, because unfortunately, they've had this tragedy, their little cousins and their Uncle Don. And so, but I see that it also teaches them empathy.
Right.
So that at school, when a child lost a parent, my Michael was up and just gave a hug, are you okay? And I loved that about him, that because he had felt that, he could then have empathy and just be there for somebody else as a 9-year-old.
At Good Grief, we serve over 400 kids a year. And when I listen to what some of these kids have gone through, really profound things, and loss is not just the death. Some people lose their homes, people who they thought they could depend and rely on, they all go out the window. They lose all of these folks. So in a big way, they're learning something about suffering and the human condition. And when I watch these kids as they're finding ways to look towards the future and rebuild their lives, they become the advocates on the playground rooting for that kid who's getting bullied, because they understand what it's like to be treated differently. And what's interesting about grieving kids is they also don't want to be treated differently. They want you to check in with them. They want you to ask how they're doing, but they don't want to be spoiled or be an outcast in the classroom. So they have an empathy for others that I have such faith and hope for the kids who come to Good Grief, because I believe that they're going to go on and do really tremendous things in their lives because they understand life a little better.
And that's what it's all about, understanding life a little bit better. Our conversation with Joe and Karen will continue with more information for families. We'll be right back.